Among the many side stories in IDV, the Truth and Inference series stands out as one of the few to be serialized, and it has gained quite a loyal fan base. The story revolves around the Orpheus Detective Agency and includes characters like Mr. Inference, Lady Truth, Paranormal Detective, Desire Melodis, and Siegfried Melodis. It's a mystery-filled journey where Inference and Truth work to uncover secrets and face off against greater forces at play. According to the wiki, their main goal is to stop Desire Melodis, the series' main antagonist, from carrying out a sinister plan. Like many IDV stories, this lore is massive and scattered across various sources, making it one of the hardest to piece together, perhaps even more difficult than the Manor game or even Call of the Abyss. The Truth and Inference lore isn't just tied to annual in-game events. It also appears in rare sources like the Truth and Inference novel, the manga, offline packages with hidden clues, and content exclusive to the Chinese server. Despite this complexity, I've done my best to piece it all together. I've gathered information from dedicated lore enthusiasts. In this video, I'll share what I've learned about the Truth and Inference lore so far. However, because the story is so vast and some sources are hard to fully understand, I'll stick to covering the in-game events for now. The offline packages and other sources might be included in the future when I've got a clearer picture. For now, we'll focus on the events that have been featured in-game or in the Essence stories. These include the Oath of the Traitors, the Golden Rose Theater, the Melodis Estate Investigation, the Phantom of the Crystal Palace, the Shrouded Bellowstane, the Castle Zenaida's Unfinished Chapter, the Voyage of Okeanos, the Proof of Azoth Theorem. Before diving into the details, I'll start by introducing what Truth and Inference is and the main characters involved. This will help anyone who's unfamiliar with the series to follow along more easily. This is your broadcaster, Silmina, signing in. The Manor game is the main storyline in the IDV universe, but there are plenty of side stories too. One of these is Truth and Inference, which we'll focus on in this series. Truth and Inference is about a detective named Mr. Inference and his assistant, Lady Truth, who work for the Orpheus Detective Agency. The story kicks off when a mysterious figure called Desire Melodis hires Mr. Inference to investigate a case for him. The events usually follow both Mr. Inference and Lady Truth investigations. But aside than that, we also get glimpses into their pasts, along with the stories of other characters like the paranormal detective, Noir, and, of course, the secrets surrounding Desire Melodis. So far, there have been 8 in-game events tied to Truth and Inference. But to really piece together the full story, you have to dig into harder-to-find sources like novels, manga, special offline packages with hidden clues, and even content exclusive to the Chinese server. Still, don't worry, I'll accompany you in the journey in this video. But before that, let's meet the main characters. The main protagonist of this series is Mr. Inference. In the Manor game, he is Naib Subedar, the mercenary. But for this story, we'll stick to calling him Inference. A bit about his background. Inference lost his parents when he was a child. What happened to them is unclear, but some theories suggest their deaths weren't natural. Afterward, he ended up in an orphanage, where he met other kids like Anna, Truth, Paranormal Detective, and possibly Rosa. He became especially good friends with Paranormal Detective. As he got older, Inference joined the army in his late teens. There, he befriended Desire Melodis and another soldier named Ronald of Ness. He excelled in the military and quickly rose through the ranks, but his time there ended abruptly after a mysterious accident. This accident not only led to his discharge, but also left him mentally scarred, changing his temperament significantly. What he did immediately after the army isn't fully known, but at some point, he crossed paths with someone named Sheriff Jose, who plays an important role in his story later on. Eventually, Inference became a private detective. There are two main reasons people speculate about why he chose this path. 1. To uncover the truth behind his parents' deaths. 2. To figure out what really happened during the accident in the army. Either way, he found his calling as a detective, and later became the director of the Orpheus Detective Agency. Another main character in the series is Lady Truth, who is Mr. Inference's partner. Her backstory reveals that she joined the Orpheus Detective Agency to search for her childhood friend, Anna. Lady Truth grew up in the same orphanage as Anna. While she didn't get along with everyone, she was very close to Anna, who became her best friend. Lady Truth stayed at the orphanage until eventually, she went out of the orphanage and became a gardener. Meanwhile, Anna was adopted by a wealthy family with a love for the arts. This family had a daughter named Hebe, making Anna her stepsister. Even after being separated, Lady Truth and Anna stayed in touch through letters. At one point, Anna told Lady Truth that she and Hebe had enrolled at a boarding school called the Lone Moon Girls' School. But then something went wrong. Hebe reached out to Lady Truth with troubling news about Anna. Concerned, Lady Truth went to the school to investigate. Tragically, Lady Truth discovered that Anna had gone missing. Determined to find her, Lady Truth joined the Orpheus Detective Agency, where she became Inference's co-worker and partner. Desire Melodies, or DM, comes from a noble family and is the current head of the Melodies clan. He's a well-known figure in the city and serves as the main antagonist of the series. Before the main events, DM was the young master of the Melodis family, living with his father, Salvatore Melodis. He also had a younger brother, Siegfried, even though Siegfried was actually adopted into the family, making him DM's stepbrother. At one point, DM joined the army, where he met Inference and several other important characters in the Truth and Inference story. After his time in the army, DM returned home and became the head of the Melodies clan following his father's death. It's unclear whether his father died or simply disappeared, but regardless, DM took over the family business. DM is known for his love of beautiful things and is described as being very generous. Since the Melodies clan is wealthy, he often sponsored people who had special talents in different fields. However, behind his charming exterior, DM isn't as innocent as he seems. He's willing to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals, even if it means using underhanded tactics. He's been described as quite unpleasant, to the point that Inference planned to take his fake smile. But what exactly DM's goal is in the story remains a mystery for now. There are other key characters, such as Siegfried and the paranormal detective, but since we are discussing the early story of Truth and Inference, let's not focus on generalities. Instead, in The Oath of the Traitors, we will focus on Lady Truth, as she is the central character of this story. Before we start, however, let me remind you one thing. Since IDV's story always contains things that are cryptic, some of this explanation would be theories instead of canon. Even among the fans, there is different interpretations altogether. I'll tell you the part when it is the theories though, so that you can interpret by yourself. For now, let's dive into the Truth and Inference, The Oath of the Traitors.
Anna. Night. Girls' school. To discover the truth about what happened to Anna, I disguised myself as a maid at the school. After the incident, someone was still the center of attention. Someone was still beloved. Someone seemed to be hiding something. And the odd thing, someone was trying to look for answers in those ancient legends. The truth may not be what it seems. Everyone is under suspicion. Things were not as simple as I imagined.
The story begins on January 5th, in an unspecified year, though it's likely set during the Victorian era based on the setting. Our protagonist, Lady Truth, receives letters from her best friend, Anna, who has been adopted by a wealthy family and now attends a prestigious school called the Lone Moon Ladies' School. Anna describes the school as a highly exclusive place for noble girls, meant to shape them into elegant and cultured members of high society. It's located on an island in the middle of a lake, and only 2 fairies visit the school each month. Anna warns that their correspondence might slow down, but reassures Lady Truth not to worry. Their letters continue the following month. Anna shares how beautiful the school is and mentions that the school's sponsor praises her natural talent. In another letter, she tells Lady Truth about a legend tied to the school, called the Night of the Lone Moon. However, after this, something strange happens. Lady Truth stops hearing from Anna, and instead receives a letter from Hebi, Anna's stepsister. Hebi explains that Anna, referred to as Echo at school, has started behaving strangely. Everyone believes she has gone mad, and the schoolmistress has decided to lock her in the school tower before sending her to an asylum. Because outsiders aren't allowed into the school, Hebi comes up with a plan. Due to her own fragile health, Hebi is allowed to request a personal maid, giving Lady Truth the chance to disguise herself and investigate what has happened to Anna. Intrigued and worried, Lady Truth agrees and travels to the Lone Moon Ladies' School, posing as Hebi's lady-in-waiting. Upon arrival, Lady Truth is greeted by the schoolmistress, who explains the school's rules. One of the most curious rules is that students must address each other using aliases, never their real names. Anna's alias is Echo, so that's how she's referred to from here on. While waiting for Hebi in the reading room, Lady Truth starts looking around and finds several items of interest: painting books, music books, and a rough draft of the Night of the Lone Moon story, the same story Echo had mentioned in her letters. Just then, a gentleman interrupts her. He introduces himself as the professor of literature, the one working on the draft. Introducing herself as Hebi's maid, Lady Truth asks him about the story. The professor eagerly begins to tell her. Once, there was a royal knight who fell in love with a princess from a fallen kingdom. Their love was forbidden, but the knight gave up everything, his title, honor, and glory, to marry her in secret. On the night before their wedding, the princess discovered his sacrifices. Overcome with guilt, she threw herself from the castle tower, ending her life. Heartbroken, the knight arranged her funeral alone, rejecting any help. He locked the tower, allowing no one inside, and often visited it to mourn her memory, always during the full moon. One night, the servants heard the princess's favorite song coming from the tower. When the knight didn't come down the next day, they searched for him and found his deceased body in the lake. The castle was abandoned after his death, but 2 things disappeared: a large blue gemstone, the royal family symbol, and the knight's violin. Rumors swirled about what happened to them, with some saying they were stolen, and others believing the knight hid them. In his honor, the knight's 8 closest friends declared that whoever found the items could claim them as their rightful owner. Lady Truth asked the professor if there were any more clues about the knight's story. The professor, after noting that she was the second person after Echo to show interest in it, shared a cryptic note. When the strings sound out, the destined will uncover the door of moonbeams. From the castle's highest point, they will arrive, treading on the moon. Shortly after, the professor left, and Hebe arrived in her wheelchair, assisted by Thalia, a student who had been helping Hebe before Lady Truth came. After a quick introduction, Hebe shared some information about the school and the legend. The Lone Moon Ladies' School was originally the Lone Moon Castle, owned by the Chowson family. When the family had no heir, the Melodies family took over and, 10 years ago, transformed the castle into the school. Hebe also explained what had happened to Echo. One night, Echo was caught in the tower with the fine art teaching assistant by Cleo, a friend of hers. Relationships between students and teachers were strictly forbidden. The teaching assistant then resigned, but since both Hebe and the professor of literature vouched for Echo, she was allowed to stay at the school. Still, afterward, Echo became obsessed with the tower and the Night of the Lone Moon legend. She would visit the tower at night, even though it was off limits, and eventually refused to leave it altogether. Rumors spread. Some said Echo was emotionally scarred, while others claimed she had fallen under the castle's curse. When Lady Truth asked what the curse was, Hebe told her to ask the professor of literature. Hebe continued the story. The schoolmistress declared Echo mad and decided to send her to an asylum. For now, Echo was confined to the tower under the supervision of a staff member named Noyce. Cleo was the only student permitted to visit her once a week. Then, Hebe asked Lady Truth to retrieve some sketches she'd forgotten in the art studio. There, Lady Truth met Narcissus, the art teacher. After exchanging pleasantries, she grabbed Hebe's sketches and returned. Among the sketches were 2 in particular, a portrait of a princess of the Chowson family and a landscape painting. Hebe explained that Narcissus was recreating the landscape painting. Both originals were from the tower, found after the knight's death. However, the Melodies family, who oversaw the tower, wouldn't allow anyone to disturb its contents to preserve them. The landscape painting, the original created by the princess, had a strange detail. If light shone on it, the moon would appear different. Hebe, however, seemed particularly drawn to the princess's portrait, but wouldn't explain why. Lady Truth reflected that she didn't have enough leads yet about Echo's change in behavior and decided she needed to either visit Echo in the tower or speak with Cleo. That night, however, a commotion broke out. Students rushed to the tower, and Lady Truth followed. When she arrived, she saw Cleo, terrified and collapsed, pointing at a painting on the wall, the princess's portrait. Cleo claimed she saw Echo walk into the painting. Intrigued, Lady Truth wanted to investigate, but the schoolmistress intervened and ordered everyone back to their dorms, saying the matter would be dealt with in the morning. Meanwhile, Echo is missing. No clues have been found, aside from Cleo's claim that she walked into the painting. The schoolmistress called everyone to the reading room to figure out what was going on. Cleo had said she saw Echo walk into a painting, which was definitely odd. But Echo was gone, completely missing, like she'd just disappeared. Noyce was sent to call the police about Echo, but they weren't expected for about 3 days. The schoolmistress wanted to talk to Hebe alone, so Lady Truth was asked to wait in the reading room. There, Lady Truth noticed Cleo's books were all in Braille. This meant Cleo was blind, which made it strange that she'd said she saw Echo walk into a painting the night before. While in the reading room, Lady Truth overheard Thalia and the literature professor talking. Thalia asked if Echo's disappearance had anything to do with the castle's curse. The professor said it was just a legend. He then saw Lady Truth listening and gave her a small nod. Lady Truth apologized but later asked him more about the curse. The professor explained the story of the curse. He said that Lone Moon Castle, where they were, had been around for a long time, and every owner had apparently had someone go missing or go crazy, like they'd lost their mind or soul. This led to the legend of the Night of the Lone Moon, a ghost who supposedly takes people's souls, haunting the tower. The professor told Lady Truth to read the castle's history book in his desk if she wanted to know more. Lady Truth did this and started reading the book. She found out that the real history of Lone Moon Castle was different from the story the professor had told her. The book said there used to be a small, rich kingdom ruled by the Chaosun family, with 9 knight families loyal to them. But the last Chaosun king was cruel, which caused trouble and made people rebel. 8 of the 9 knight families eventually decided to open the castle's docks to the rebels, and the king was overthrown. The king only had a daughter, a princess. The leader of the rebellion, who became the new king, decided not to hurt her and focused on punishing the old king. He even suggested she marry one of his knights. But the princess killed herself by jumping off a tower before the wedding. The knight she was going to marry also died soon after in a mysterious way. After a small rebellion was put down, the new king found out the princess had secretly been gathering her own rebel army. But the strange thing was, on the day of the planned rebellion, her followers weren't waiting for her. They were waiting to hear if she was dead. When they found out she took her own life, they scattered. This was pretty different from the story Lady Truth had heard before, the romantic one about the knight who was sad about the princess dying and went to mourn in the castle's tower. This made her curious, what is actually real in the story? And so, she decided to go check out the tower as well. Lady Truth entered the tower without difficulty, as no one was guarding it. The room inside resembled a girl's bedroom with a delicate and personal touch. She noticed 2 original paintings on display, a serene landscape and a portrait of the princess, both of which were recreated by Narcissus and Hebe. Just as Lady Truth was about to leave, she froze. Footsteps echoed up the stairs, meaning her presence would be compromised. Panicked, she quickly hid herself. To her surprise, it was Narcissus, the art teacher, who entered the tower. Narcissus appeared to know something about the tower's secrets. Lady Truth watched as he adjusted something in the room, causing the light to dim. In the dimness, a section of the wall beneath the princess's portrait began to glow softly. She heard Narcissus murmur, "So that's how it is." Then, he returned everything to its original position, extinguishing the glow, and left the tower. Lady Truth followed soon after. Back in the reading room, she waited for Hebe and the schoolmistress to finish their private conversation. When Hebe returned, she looked troubled. Concerned, Lady Truth asked what was wrong. Hebe explained that the schoolmistress believed Echo had taken her own life, and that Cleo's claim of seeing Echo walk into a painting was just a product of shock. Lady Truth disagreed, insisting she didn't believe Echo would do such a thing. Furthermore, she pointed out that Cleo's story didn't add up. Being blind, she couldn't have seen anything. When Lady Truth suggested confronting Cleo, Hebe urged her to wait. Cleo was in town with Noise, who had taken her to provide a statement. Later that night, while everyone else was asleep, Lady Truth couldn't resist investigating further. She returned to the tower, hoping to find more clues. As she approached, she spotted Narcissus entering the tower ahead of her. She decided to wait outside until he left. But time passed, and Narcissus never came back down. Impatient and curious, Lady Truth finally entered the tower. To her shock, the room was empty. Narcissus was nowhere to be found. He had vanished, just like Echo. The next day, the schoolmistress gathered everyone in the art studio. Lady Truth expected the police to have arrived by then, but neither the police nor Noyce, who had gone to contact them, were there. Cleo, however, had returned, escorted by medical personnel from the town. Adding to the mystery, Narcissus had also mysteriously disappeared. Concerned, the schoolmistress decided to inspect the rooms of both Noyce and Narcissus. There, she discovered that their belongings of importance had been taken. The schoolmistress and everyone were then realized of something grim. Both Noyce and Narcissus had planned their escape in advance and left the school, for reasons unknown. Lady Truth, remembering Narcissus' presence in the tower the night before, wanted to share what she knew with the schoolmistress. However, Hebe pulled her aside and warned her to stay silent, reminding her that going to the tower had been a violation of school rules. The professor of literature volunteered to go to the town to contact the police, promising to return by the end of the day. After he left, the schoolmistress instructed everyone to return to their rooms. Hebe, however, convinced the schoolmistress to let her and Lady Truth visit the tower under the pretense of honoring Hebe's connection to Echo. In the tower, Lady Truth expressed her belief that Echo was still alive and had likely escaped, just as Narcissus had. When Hebe questioned how Narcissus could have left a locked room, Lady Truth shared what she had observed during her previous visit. Lady Truth began re-examining the room, recalling how Narcissus had dimmed the light and triggered a glow beneath the princess's portrait. Looking out the window, she noticed a lighthouse in the distance. On the dusty windowsill, she spotted marks indicating that something had been used to cover the window. She then realized that the object used for it was the original landscape painting. And thus, she retrieved the painting and placed it over the window. As expected, the room dimmed, but light from the moon in the painting filtered through, illuminating a spot beneath the princess's portrait. Lady Truth inspected the glowing area but found nothing unusual. She then asked Hebe about the lighthouse. Hebe explained that it illuminated for 3 nights each year to commemorate the rebellion's success against the cruel king, a celebration called the Moonbeam of Hope. Hebe revealed a crucial detail. The first night of the lighthouse's illumination was the day Echo disappeared. The second night coincided with Narcissus's disappearance. That night would mark the 3rd and final night. Lady Truth theorized that when the lighthouse shone through the painting's moonlight, it might reveal something new. Hebe seemed reassured by Lady Truth's deduction, convinced that Echo had not taken her own life, but instead attempted to escape. However, she raised a new question. How could Echo and Narcissus have left the island? The school was isolated, and supply ships only arrived twice a month. The next ferry wasn't due for a week, and the docks remained closed except on ferry days. This sparked a realization in Lady Truth. On the 2nd day after Echo's disappearance, which is the same day Narcissus vanished, the docks had been opened. The docks had been used that day to allow Noyce and the professor of literature to go to the town and contact the police. Lady Truth came to a grim conclusion. Noyce had helped Echo escape the island, while the professor had assisted Narcissus escape as well. That evening, the professor of literature returned as promised, bringing several police officers. The police reviewed the situation, noting that Noyce hadn't reported Echo's disappearance as instructed. They also uncovered his criminal record. Based on this, they concluded that Noyce had killed Echo and, with Cleo's help, disposed of the body and hid the evidence. The police prepared to arrest Cleo, but Lady Truth intervened. She argued that their theory didn't align with the facts, and reminded them that Narcissus had also disappeared. She urged them to hear Cleo's side of the story. Cleo recounted that on the night Echo vanished, the schoolmistress had permitted her to visit Echo. Contrary to expectations, Echo had been calm and even shared stories about her childhood. Cleo eventually fell asleep, but woke to the sound of a violin's faint buzz. She saw the painting glowing and witnessed Echo stepping into it. Lady Truth recognized Cleo's story as echoing the legend of the Night of the Lone Moon, which stated, "When the strings sound out, the destined will uncover the door of moonlight. From the castle's highest, they will arrive treading on the moon." At that moment, the lighthouse outside shone brightly, and the wailing of a siren filled the air. Lady Truth conferred with the schoolmistress and pointed out that the castle's layout had changed over the years. Specifically, the tower used to face a different direction and had another hidden window. She suggested that finding this hidden window would reveal the truth. The professor of literature, in a knowing tone, asked if she had already figured it out. Lady Truth nodded, explaining that she now understood the legend's meaning. The strings referred to the wailing sirens, while the door of moonlight referred to the moon in the landscape painting. When lit by the lighthouse's beam, the moonlight would reveal a hidden door. Lady Truth demonstrated by placing the landscape painting over the window. The lighthouse beam shone through the painting's moon, illuminating a specific spot on the wall, at the eye of the mask held by the princess in her portrait. The police took down the portrait and found a loose tile behind it. When they pushed it, a section of the nearby wall moved, showing a hidden room just big enough for one person, as well as the aforementioned hidden window. This room was right above the docks, which explained how Narcissus and Echo had gotten out of the tower. It turned out that Echo was really into the Night of the Lone Moon legend, and used it as inspiration for her escape. With help from the art teacher, who was willing to lose his job, Echo made a plan. She acted like she was crazy so they'd lock her in the tower, giving her time to find the secret passage. The plan was a huge success. On the hidden room's windowsill, the police found an old violin case, which, according to the legend, belonged to the Night of the Lone Moon. Still, the violin wasn't inside. The police wondered if Echo or Narcissus had taken it, but Lady Truth spoke up. "Whoever took it can keep it," she said, because the original owner didn't want it anyway. She said this while looking at the literature professor. Now, what happens from this point is a bit unclear. The story gets a little vague, and the clues are all over the place. I actually found 3 completely different ideas about it, especially about the origins of the literature professor, so you may want to take the following conclusion with a grain of salt. Still, this is what I think happened. After Lady Truth said that, the professor agreed with her, saying that the knight didn't want the treasure. He just wanted the story to have a proper ending. The police argued that the professor couldn't speak for the knight, but the professor showed he knew what he was talking about by revealing a brooch he was wearing. It had the Lone Moon Knight's family symbol on it. It turned out the literature professor was a descendant of the Lone Moon Knight and the owner of the violin. He then turned to the schoolmistress, talking about the promise his family made, in which the schoolmistress nodded in agreement. Lady Truth then realized that the schoolmistress came from the Melodies family, which is the current owner of the castle. The case was closed. The police issued a wanted notice for Noyce, but just a missing person notice for Echo. Narcissus was left alone because the police thought he was an adult and had left on his own. With the case closed, Lady Truth decided to continue her search for Echo, who, now that she's no longer at the school, will refer back to Anna. She went to the art room to say goodbye to Hebe, who accepted her farewell politely. However, something Hebe said before they parted made Lady Truth curious. Hebe mentioned that while everyone considered the kingdom's princess a gifted artist, the person who painted her portrait seemed even more talented. Furthermore, the princess in the portrait appeared much naive and happier than the historical accounts described. This sparked Lady Truth's interest, and she couldn't dismiss it. She eventually wrote to the literature professor about her thoughts. He replied with 2 letters that concluded the story of the Chaosan family and the legend of the Lone Moon. Combining these letters with the existing legend, the characters' design notes, fan theories, and scattered information about the Oath of the Traitors story, we can construct the following theory about the story's ending. The Chaosan family was once a royal family served by 9 knights. The last Chaosan ruler was a cruel tyrant, creating widespread discontent and sparking rebellions. One of the king's loyal knights, which is a woman, foresaw that the situation would eventually escalate. She decided to impersonate the royal prince, becoming the princess, while the actual prince disguised himself as a knight. 5 years later, the rebellion, aided by 8 of the 9 knights, successfully overthrew the king. While the king was brought to justice, the rebellion's leaders, which is the Melodis family, chose to spare the princess, as their primary goal had been to address the king's misrule. The princess was then arranged to marry one of the knights, the Lone Moon Knight. However, the princess, whom we know as the disguised female knight, secretly sent the royal family's insignia, a blue gemstone, to the disguised prince. She had secretly prepared an army in case the prince, as his father had wished, decided to rebel against the new rulers. If he chose this path, he could reveal his true identity to the Knight clan leaders using the gemstone, triggering the rebellion. The prince, however, chose to relinquish his claim to the throne and live a normal life as a commoner. He sought refuge with the female knight's cousin, whose family had remained neutral during the conflict and had a history of teaching. The prince disappeared from public life, abandoning the Chaosan name and effectively ending their lineage. Realizing this, the female knight knew she had one final act. The prince had chosen to live as a commoner, abandoning the Chaosan name, and yet the public still believed the Chaosans had only a daughter, the princess, who was really her. Therefore, she planned to end her own life to completely erase the Chaosans from history. Beforehand, she wrote a letter to her close friend, the Lone Moon Knight, revealing her disguise and explaining her reasons for remaining loyal to the Chaosan family, citing their differing views on justice. Upon learning of the princess's death, her secretly assembled army disbanded, as she had been their leader. The Lone Moon Knight then made an agreement with the Melodis family. They promised each other to keep this tragedy a secret. Over time, the story became a legend. Only the Melodis family, the Lone Moon Knight's family, and perhaps the descendants of the Chaosan family knew the truth. Time passed until 10 years ago, Lone Moon Castle was converted into a prestigious girls' school, with the schoolmistress, a member of the Melodis family, placed in charge. Among the teachers were the literature professor, a descendant of the Lone Moon Knight, and the popular, yet mysterious, art teacher, Narcissus. Lady Truth realized Hebe's observation about the princess's portrait was the key to solve the mystery surrounding Narcissus. If the princess was an artistic prodigy, how could the artist who painted her portrait be even more skilled? The answer lay in the painter's true identity, the prince himself, who was a master of art. This revelation tied into the present-day mystery. Since Narcissus is the art teacher, and he knew something about the tower, he is then believed to be a descendant of the Chaosans. It was theorized that he had taken the legendary violin, which the professor of literature cryptically remarked had found its rightful owner. The blue gemstone, however, was never recovered, as the Chasson descendant retained it. Whether Lady Truth reached this full conclusion is uncertain, as this was the theory I could come up with after analyzing other theories. One thing is certain, she would continue her search for Anna. Meanwhile, a separate mystery involving an actress and theaters occurred, drawing in another main character named Inference. This became another story in the Truth and Inference series, known to fans as the Golden Rose Theater. This is your broadcaster Silmina, signing out.